Okay, your first step is to take the stepper motors in the back off, the feed housing, and the fans apart so that you have nothing but the cooling block exposed. What you're going to then do is determine how you're going to be able to unclog it based on what you see when you take it all apart. Now, after you've taken it apart and made a judgment call on what you can do based on the tutorial, your first step now is to heat that extruder side up to 230 degrees Celsius so you can unclog either the upper or lower portion of the extruder assembly. Okay, so the purpose of this video is to show you several ways that you can unclog the extruder. Now, one of the simplest ways that you can unclog an extruder is go ahead and take the filament that's in the block, and if you can, grab it, the one that's stuck, and heat your block to 230 degrees, take a pair of pliers and do what's called force unclogging. So basically you see I'm able to take filament and I'm able to ram it down through the extruder assembly with a pair of pliers and put some force and unclog the extruder. This is probably the very first step that I would take if you want to unclog the extruder. And again, you just keep pushing the filament through until a steady bead of filament is coming out the extruder nozzle, and you have almost no resistance when you're doing this. Now, the next way to unclog an extruder is if there's a different scenario, and that is the filament is barely exposed and it's sitting right outside the extruder assembly, and you don't have the ability to take a pair of pliers and push it like I showed in the next step. Now, I would highly recommend doing this step where you actually take either a paper clip, or I have a 2mm ramrod that I can use. And basically you take that ramrod and you're going to put it right on the tip of the filament, and you're going to push that filament down into the assembly. Now, the nice thing about the Micro Swiss upgrade is I can go all the way down to the nozzle and even unclog my nozzle using this ramrod that I have right here, and I can get everything out of the extruder. Now, this necessarily won't work if you have a PTFE sleeve, because you're gonna jam up in the PTFE sleeve probably by the time you get right into the housing right here. So, but this is another way you can unclog the extruder. Now, another scenario is you've upgraded to the Micro Swiss upgrade, and somehow filament has caked up inside the housing in the cooling block, and you're not able to push through and get it out. In that case, I would take the extruder off, make sure that not just the nozzle, and make sure that the heating block here is at 230 degrees, and I would go in the opposite direction and push upward to get out and dislodge the material in here. I've seen that happen, but again, you can use this 2mm rod to do this. I will have a link to where you can get this rod in the video description. Okay, the last trick I want to show you is you're going to take the E string on a guitar, the smallest E string, and you're going to take the E string and you're going to go right under in the nozzle, and this is if you have a clogged nozzle, and you're basically going to take that E string and find the tip of the extruder, and you have to have it to 230 degrees Celsius to get it warm. And then once you find the tip, you're going to insert the E string all the way in through the nozzle. Now you can see I'm actually coming out of the nozzle right now and all the way through the extruder assembly. This is a great way to unclog just the nozzle. Now, the previous tips I gave were how to unclog the extruder up at the top end. This is how you can unclog at the bottom end of your 3D printer. Again, this is E string. It's the smallest E string for a guitar. It works perfect. And you can push it all the way up and through the assembly and get your clog dislodged. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, the final step now is to determine why the clog happened so you can prevent it from happening again. Now, I did a previous tutorial series on how to upgrade the extruder assembly and remove the PTFE tube. because sometimes that PTFE tube shrinks and causes clogs. So you may actually have to take everything apart and take the nozzle off and remove the PTFE sleeve and replace it if that was the real cause of the clog. Now, some other causes, if you don't have a PTFE sleeve or the PTFE sleeve is not shrunken, could be that your build plate is not level and there's a high area and the nozzle is going over to that high area and the filament cannot get through the nozzle tip, so it goes back up into the extruder assembly and it causes a clog. I've seen this happen numerous times, and generally you'll hear a lot of scratching or vibrations occurring during the print, and that would indicate there's a raised area on the print bed. Another area that could cause, or a reason that could cause the clogged extruder, is maybe your filament is being bound or binding while it's unwinding. So what this could do is it could stop the filament from going all the way into the extruder assembly and just sit there and cause it just to melt and sit in the assembly. And then when it cools, you have a stuck piece of filament maybe up in the upper section of your extruder assembly. Also, it could do a false positive, meaning you really don't have a clogged extruder and filament isn't coming out, and what's happening is the filament is not being fed through the extruder, so you think it's clogged, but it's not. And then finally, you could also get a gear in the stepper motor filament load housing, and it could have shards of filament in the gear, and it's not able to actually grab the filament and push it through the nozzle. In that situation, what you would do is take everything apart, and you take a toothbrush or a brush to the gear piece and take those shards out so that the gear can grab and push the filament through the extruder. I hope this was helpful, and thank you so much for watching.